Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Connecting Things. So yeah, we're a group of just people that have come together. There's a little team of, I think, 7 of us, that are on a little text thread, say, hey, who's speaking next month? And we get cool people because we've got friends that do really amazing things that are generally from our community and love that what this is happening. The whole deal, why we started this, was just to bring creatives and entrepreneurs and freelancers together in Orange County, and it's been happening, which is really cool. This morning, we are introducing Eric Trine, who is been a friend for a while. He does incredible work. He's an amazing speaker, not to, set you up, but we're going to hear that story and talk today as you can explain that, arranging oneself with in the arrangement. If you don't follow him on Instagram, I would highly recommend it. At Eric Trine, if you want like a little daily laugh, he's really good at that. But without further ado, I will go turn off the music, and here is Eric Trine.
All right, thanks. Good morning. Yeah. So I actually live in Long Beach, so it took us almost an hour to get down here. And then, when you do a talk like this, you want to get up extra early, have coffee, make sure you poop before you do it. And so I've been up since like 5:30, so I'm ready to bring it hard for you guys. But this is a title I gave this talk last night because I think that this speaks to my approach to design and living, and we're all trying to arrange ourselves within the arrangement. And, I have a clicker. But this is a quote from Charles Eames. It's a small designer you guys might have heard of, but design is a plan for arranging elements in such a way as best to accomplish a particular purpose. And I think that for any of us in any sort of creative field, we work with a certain kind of level of raw materials. The raw materials can be display screens or interfaces, or in my case, metal and wood, the rawest of raw. There's people who stack rocks, and that's like pretty raw material. There's people who climb rocks, which is a very, very raw material. But we all kind of arrange these elements in a different way to bring about a purpose. For me, this started, when I was very young. It started with a bump on the head, not unlike Dr. Brown from Back to the Future, where he fell off his toilet and was trying to hang a picture, and he discovered the idea for the flux capacitor. Mine started early on in my life when I was about 3 years old, and I was jumping back and forth from the couch to the coffee table, couch to the coffee table, couch to the coffee table, and I slipped, and I hit my head on the coffee table, and my head split open, and I had to get 30 stitches. And I think the funny thing, because, a lot of what I do is furniture, is that we have these experiences with furniture that kind of shape us in unintended ways, like splitting our heads open. 5 years later, my younger brother, when he was also 3 years old, was doing the same move I was teaching him, and he jumped onto the couch and fell back onto the coffee table and split his head open and had to get stitches. So 2 things happened that day. My parents, 1, immediately threw that coffee table in the trash. And 2, I realized kind of what I wanted to be when I grew up. And it was a stuntman. I realized that no one should ever be jumping back from a couch to a coffee table and split their head open anymore. We need to learn to do this well and right and not get injured. And so as I grew up here kind of in Orange County. I'm from Los Alamitos, Seal Beach area. And I went to the Orange County High School of the Arts for school, for high school, which is a really interesting program. And now it's down in Santa Ana, but it used to be in Los Alamitos. So it was part of like my district. And I played sports, but at a certain point, when I got into high school, everyone else started growing and I didn't. I actually lied on my driver's permit to pretend I weighed over 100 pounds when I was 15, because I was really little. And as you can see here, it looks like I was missing a leg too. So, but in the program I was in at the Orange County High School of the Arts, I joined production and design, which is basically building stuff for the theater and sets and design. And I joined that program because I had to quit sports because I was literally 5'3" and 98 pounds. I saw these guys using power tools all day long. And I was like, wow, I want to go just use power tools and build stuff in the afternoon rather than try and play basketball. And so I joined. So I joined this program, and part of the physical education requirement in that program was a thing called stage combat. And so they had to try and figure out a way to give us PE credit as part of the program. So there's a thing called stage combat, which is basically stunt work for the stage. So think Princess Bride, the movie, and think Wesley and Inigo Montoya. Like, that was my goal when I was in high school. Like, I want to be Wesley. Like, when they do Princess Bride 2, I want to be that guy doing the sword fighting. So that was like really my thing. And when I graduated high school, as a graduation gift, I went to the Society of American Fight Directors National Stage Combat Workshop. And I got certified as an actor combatant in 3 kinds of sword fighting and unarmed combat. And so I came back from that program, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. But the problem is I met a lot of guys who were already doing like stunt work, and they were 32 and they were 35, and they're like, I've had 2 back surgeries and 3 knee replacements. And there's this famous commercial, a VW commercial from about 10, maybe 15 years ago, where this shopping cart is coming across this parking lot and this guy runs to tackle it. And that guy was at the workshop, and he's like, I had to do that take like 75 times. And he really did run and tackle a shopping cart like Jackass style to get that take. And I was like, these guys' bodies are destroyed. So when I got back from that, I just started making art in my parents' garage and never looked back on the stunt thing. And around that time, so this is like early 2000s, I graduated high school 2001. So 2001, 2, 3, I started just making art and making paintings. And I was actually part of a program here that happened the first Wednesday of the month, interestingly enough. And we called it First Wednesday, where we had like art showcases with local bands. And we curated it here. And that happened 2002, 3, 4. Cold War Kids, little known story, played their very first show right here in this living room as part of one of those events. And bands like Delta Spirit also played for these. And the kind of work I was making at that time had to do with this kind of graphic flips of houses. And when I decided to kind of pursue art full time, this work just kind of kept coming out of me. And when I got to the end of my senior thesis in undergrad, I made this structure that was a house that folded into 434 different positions. And so it was all on hinges and wheels, and it opened up and created these different kind of spaces of interior, exterior, different kind of gestures of space. And that could be, all the way reversed. And I was really interested in this idea of homes, houses, hospitality, space, how we interact with space. And at the very same time, my parents tore down the house that we grew up in to kind of rebuild their dream home. So I think a lot of things were playing kind of narratively in the back of my mind. And one of my close friends kind of gave me a critique of this work and goes, wow, it's really interesting how much, your parents rebuilding their home has affected you. And I was like, well, that's a really good reading. I didn't even think of that. So I was doing this kind of housework, homework, kind of from a fine art perspective. It was conceptual. It was in a white-walled gallery. It was about thinking about these concepts. And then when I graduated in 2007, I shortly after proposed to my girlfriend. She became fiancée, and then we got married in 2008. We moved into our first house. And for any of you guys who are doing that, either when you're married or on your own, I think it's interesting when you move in with someone else, your partner, for the first time, and you're trying to define what does your space look like. What does your space look like for yourself as you extend it in hospitality to your friends? And so we started doing all these DIYs because we didn't have any money. And so very early on, started, in our little back house apartment in Long Beach, trying to figure out ways to build things and construct things that represented us, not only to ourselves, but to other people. So we started making plant stands. These are old IKEA pots, and I wish they would bring them back because they're so cool. We built a shelf. Anybody have a shelf? Anybody build a shelf? We had a shelf, and we wanted to show people all of our cool stuff, like vintage typewriters and roller skates and like, and this is 2008, so this is like pre-Instagram, like hashtag my life, like what's up? This is the inside, like old Polaroid cameras, So it's just really funny that like this is so normal that now we see home blogs and shelter magazines talk about styling your shelf, which is really interesting because I'm like, is it for sale? Like when people walk into the house, like, love the way you styled that credenza, like looks really good. I want to buy it. And it's just, but the way we had it displayed was almost like a form of merchandising, which I think is really interesting that we do with our space. And then I was doing, started doing the DIYs, got more advanced. And we were building stuff for our friends, and then friends of friends, and word got out. And it actually really interesting. Some of you may know Jared Gibo, local guy. This is a desk I made for him, and then a credenza I made for him. This is a grid structure across the street at the camp at Eastboro. So I've had this connection with the lab and the camp for a long time. And from 2005 to 2007, I was actually kind of the resident artist here. So this is a bit of a homecoming for me, but back in those days, kind of pre-recession, I would just show up in the morning and the creative directors here would be like, hey, I saw this on a blog. Here's the credit card. Go to Ganal, build it today by the end of the day. And we would just build really, really rad stuff. And it's part of the culture of these kind of areas, the lab and the camp, where they've always kind of created a budget to do really rad stuff. And so this was this greenhouse thing at Eastboro, which now is completely different, but this was back in 2009. And then, these really simple pieces of furniture, and also the colors really reduced, just like raw steel, black powder-coated steel, walnut. And this kind of transition from making fine art about houses and homes to actually making things that go in homes, I realized kind of tickled the same conceptual interest for me, that it wasn't just a conversation about a house, it was sitting on a piece and having a conversation in a house. And it gained traction for me. So I started developing some pieces, and that, again, very simple, very reduced, but kind of try to create a line. And at the same time, it also should be mentioned when I went to work for my dad for a couple years. My dad has this power equipment company. And when I proposed to my wife, my dad was like, hey, do you want like a salary and health insurance? I was like, that'd be great. And he's like, yeah, let's get your marriage off on the right foot. Let's have you not worry about that. I'd love to give you a job. And I was like, I would love to not work for you, but I love money. So let's do it. And so I went and worked for my dad, but what I did was it kind of gave me the income to have my own studio. And so I'd go work for my dad's company for like 9 to 5 with like a 2-hour lunch break. And then I'd hightail it out of there and go to the studio and make stuff. And so, as I said, doing these projects and these DIYs, advanced DIYs, at a certain point, it hit that tipping point where I was like, well, I think I could actually go for this and make a living on my own. And in fall of 2010, I quit my dad's job and I went out on my own to do this freelance stuff. And at the time, the big store across the street at the camp, Seed People's Market. So I built all of the original fixtures there with some other people here. So Danny Simon, who some of you might know, who's still doing work around here. He and I just built all of the stuff for that project. And it was at that time where you could just go to a salvage yard and just weld some things together, and it was like reclaimed. And that was cool. And it was reclaimed when you actually reclaimed stuff, not like buy reclaimed wood for more than new wood. You know what I mean? Which is like a really weird thing. Like it used to be economical to use reclaimed stuff. But when I quit, I found out about this graduate program in Portland, Oregon called Applied Craft and Design. And their basic premise was for people who wanted to start a small business and make things. And I was like, that is tailor-made for me. That's the design program I wanted to go to. industrial design appealed to me, but as far as I could tell, that would be like I would get really good at drawing things on the computer, and it didn't. I just was like, yeah, I don't want to be a good drawer of things. I want to make stuff. So I applied, and this was kind of my portfolio to apply these really, really simple things. And when I got there, and here's where like the Instagram story begins to come in. My wife was a sales rep in the fashion industry, and she was on a business trip for a week. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be in the studio every single night, and I'm just going to have some beers and make stuff. And so this was fall 2011, and I gave myself a challenge to build a lounge chair in 1 hour. Still have a ways to go, but a good start. And so I built this kind of chair frame. And when I set out to start making chairs, I think the distinction that I want you to hear is that I decided to make a chair rather than design a chair. And that kind of thread in my work, that kind of thought has become a thread in my work where I didn't sit down and draw it and try to conceptualize what is the meaning of a lounge chair. I was just like, no, I'm going to grip it and rip it and bend some steel and move it around and weld it and look at the gesture. And for some of you who've taken art classes, in drawing one, they set up a still life and they're like, just do a gesture drawing. Just get those basic shapes, lay that down, get the feeling of it. And I think that's what I was trying to do. So the first night I did that. And the second night I was like, you know what? So after the 1 hour thing, I was like, well, I didn't even finish that. So the second night I was like, I'm going to make a 2 hour chair. So the second night I set out and made this chair frame. And I did that 5 nights in a row. And at the end of the semester, I kind of finished them all in different levels. So I made these frames, and then I gave myself a couple months to finish them. And it's so funny, like seeing people's comments, like our friends and, my wife comment, sexiness, like the support is like so crucial. She's like on a business trip. She's like, what's Eric making? But it's funny too, because this is so long ago in like Instagram world where, but that important like level of like direct support and engagement, I think is really important. And that's something that we've lost because so much of Instagram content is paid for now. And then, here's the 5 chairs, and I did that. And some of you may know Amber Earl down here. She used to live in Costa Mesa. She was like, love all your new stuff, E. But so these are friends commenting and then put it out in the critique. And so what happened at the end of the semester showcase is I had this chair, and this is chair number 2. And I met a guy there, and this is up in Portland, who was like, I really like that chair. Can you make me one? I was like, well, it's not super comfortable. It's not super right. If you just pay me materials and like a 6-pack, like I'll prototype a new one for you. And if it sucks, you can return it and we can switch it. So this is chair number 2, and then this is the second version I did. And I posted that on Instagram, and then I had another person who was like, I really like that chair, so can you make me one? I was like, cool. So I call it patron prototyping, where I had people kind of fronting the materials and paying for me to go through these iterations of design. So I was working in grad school, I was working on these individual pieces, but the individual pieces were also developing in this kind of greater context of a whole, like a vibe. And at the end of my first year, I put together this display called 1,000 Cubic Feet of Radness. And it was basically experiments that I had done in making and things I was collecting at thrift stores, because thrift stores in Portland are just insane. They're so good. All of our stuff is so tapped out here, but Portland 5 years ago was unbelievable. Here's another version of a chair. So one of the things that I would do, so this was an interior designer who also saw the frame, and she said, oh, but what would we do with like a single panel of leather? So we began to take this chair frame and develop it kind of through my trajectory, but then also have other people kind of see it and initiate further iterations of the design. Grad school, though, is kind of like this scene from Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where Jason Rudd's character, Kunu, the surf instructor, teaches Jason Segel's character, Peter, how to surf. I don't know if you guys remember this, but look it up. But Jason Segel's like, super sad. He's like, I'm going to go surf. And he takes him out, and Paul Rudd is looking at him. He's like, all right, you ready? Okay, pop up. And he's like, okay, sit down faster. Okay, you get pop up. Okay, no, do less. It's about instinct. Okay, you got to feel it. And he goes, okay, do nothing. If you do nothing, it's do everything. And he's like, okay, he's just laying there and he's like, okay, you got to do more than that. Okay, you know what, pop, we'll figure it out when we get out there. And grad school is kind of like that. At least my experience was you have these mentors and you have these people running this program and administrators, and they're all kind of pulling you in different directions. But really, you don't really figure it out like surfing until you actually get out there. You can teach someone conceptually how to surf, but until you actually get in the water. So I was having this really difficult time because I was beginning to develop furniture. And I made this coffee table, and I remember sitting in a critique, and someone was like, so are you commenting on the space between the sofa and the TV and American culture and how we interact with that and like how that defines our lives? And I was like, no, it's a fucking coffee table. I think I'm going to sell it for $1,200. It's a slab of walnut, and so school's just like very weird because you overthink it and you get jerked around. And so I was getting jerked around a lot. And I had another friend who moved to Portland for grad school who was also getting kind of jerked around. And we both noticed that our work was connecting with people on Instagram and social media, but we weren't being met with that same connection actually in our program. And he was in a separate program. So we decided to collaborate together. And this was the real kind of revolution for me, collaborating with him because he's a illustrator and graphic designer. And his whole sensibility was so rooted in play and fun. And it's not that serious, just enjoy it. And I was like, no, this is the thing because they're telling me this is the thing. So we created this collaboration called Alley-Oop, which if anybody has heard of basketball, it's a cool sport. There's this move where, someone tosses up the ball and someone finishes it by dunking it. And so we created this collaboration called Alley-Oop, which was kind of like set it up, knock it down. And we just got weird and had fun. And I took all of that playtime in my studio, and he would we would just take raw material and zap it together. The great thing about welding is it's like a hot glue gun for adults, and you can zap things together very quickly and build up forms. So we began to build up forms and make these arrangements and still lives, and this is like the whole mass of what we did. And we, in the course of about 2 weeks, just made all of this stuff. And we called it Alley-Oop. And for me, it was this kind of color revolution. When I used to do paintings 10 years ago, there was so much color. And then something happened when I got into furniture that I was just taking it way too seriously. And I think there was some conservatism that was happening around the recession. And there was some zeitgeisty, like, yeah, reclaimed and old wood and like, raw steel. But after living in Portland, and it is like, at that time, it was so much of that I was like, we got to break out of it. And it's gray. Let's bring some color. And when I started doing this stuff, people were like, oh, you're that designer from California, huh? And it was like, yeah, how could you tell? So from kind of these experiments and play and non-functionality, I began to then refine them and apply functionality. And these pieces kind of became my thesis when I finished grad school. So a lot of color, more refinement. So that's that same chair that I started with at the beginning of grad school, kind of ended up becoming my project was that chair. And so when I finished graduate school, I had an opportunity to show my work in Design Week in New York. The blog Design Milk invited me to a showcase called East Meet West to showcase West Coast designers. And this was in 2013. So I brought these chairs out for the showcase and met a buyer from Anthropologie, and they put in an order, just like a purchase order for these chairs that were like my thesis, like my grade was based on this. But I skipped my graduate show to show these pieces, and I also did these, lowered the arms, added some wood, but just, and this is leather, green leather, which is super crazy. Oh, this is the break. This is the pause. But so I finished graduate school with these pieces, and I was like, okay, now I'm launching my studio, and I make stuff. I make furniture, and the chair kind of transitions from chair number 2 to a really fancy name, the rod and weave chair. Is what I call it, because it's made of solid rod and it has woven leather. I like really direct, like pragmatic names, not like the Cinderella Lucy chair number 7. And you're like, what? So I kind of made this transition into product, is basically how I ended graduate school. My wife and I, she's about to have a baby, and we moved back down to Long Beach because our grandparents baited us back to come back, and we're like, free babysitting, awesome. And so when I moved back in the fall of 2013, I kind of reestablished my connection here in Long Beach, in Orange County, in LA, and launched the studio. I saw this quote by this, rare, nobody's ever heard of this guy, but doing what you love is as important as ever. But if you're going to make a living at it, it helps to find a niche where money flows as a regular consequence of the success of your idea, which is kind of basically in a kind of advanced way of saying living the dream. But I noticed this transition where I could sit in this pocket where conceptually I was participating in the same narrative that I always enjoyed, being part of homes, home lives, being part of that narrative, that kind of sociology, but making products that like had a price and a name and an online shop, rather than trying to make it conceptually in the fine art world. And so it's funny, these like pedestals back here, I decided like, I'm going to take these into production, but they were a little bit cost prohibitive because of these little discs on the top and bottom. To get those lasered was kind of expensive. And I was like, this like plant pedestal is going to be like $300. So I took the idea a little bit further and bumped up the base. And you can see there's some plant stands here, but we kind of bumped up the base. We turned up the base, and basically we eliminated that disc and, made a pedestal, and then all incorporated this kind of ring planter. And the funny thing is, this idea for the standard terracotta pot on the front of the building over here by Urban Outfitters, there's these ring planters mounted to the concrete that I think I did here about 10 years ago, that were for standard terracotta pots. And so there's always like this thing like, I did this thing a couple years ago, I guess that would work. And this is the product. The product is the ring planter that you can buy on my online shop, but then you supply your own pot, because if I ship the $5 terracotta pot, the rate of it probably breaking would be pretty high. And at every Lowe's and Home Depot and garden center in the country, you can buy that pot. So I'm basically creating a piece of hardware. And so I have these octahedron ring planters. Octahedron is the basic, the geometric shape that they're based on. And I developed these series of planters and plant stands. I then scaled it up, the cat for scale, and made side tables. And the cool thing is that once I landed on this structure, I could kind of play with those levels of scale. And I found a 24-inch disc at a salvage yard. I was like, I wonder if this could actually work as a side table. And this side table is currently my best-selling product. And it retails for $299, and we manufacture it here in LA. And it's just like, I don't know, to be able to do a $300 side table that's made domestically, I think that's like kind of a rad goal, and has a wholesale margin in there, is really, really difficult to do, because I know how to make the $8,000 like slab table. Making stuff domestically that's like affordable, like your friends can actually buy, which is how this whole thing started with the DIYs, is that friends were like, I need a bed. And I was like, I bet I can make you a bed for $400. And it was, so that kind of through line of accessibility has always been really important to me. And then I would continue to develop the pieces. So there's these two channels of, I would have these products and continue to develop them kind of in-house and go through different iterations. Like this is a plated copper version of the chair. This black on black with white oak, pink table. There's the copper one with veg tan. So we do these channels where develop it in-house, but then what would happen, again, through this level of Instagram, doing different showcases, putting ourselves out there, we would have clients, either commercial clients or interior designers, see the work we were doing and say, so I've seen you do this. Can you also make this? And so we would get these requests, and again, more of these products, where I had this request to do a bar stool for a place called the Ojai Rancho Inn up in Ojai, which I'm sure half of you have been to. And they said, we're turning this pool house into a bar, and we need a bar stool that's kind of like hippie, cosmic, cool, Ojai triangles. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And I already had the plant stands. And so we basically took that same kind of structure and kind of constrained the proportions and stretched them out. And this is a counter height version, but we did a bar height version that's a little bit taller, but it's the same basic idea, and then added footrests. And then they said, okay, and now we want it brass. And so it could fulfill all the things like cosmic, cool, triangle, brass, Ojai, awesome. And so we did these. And this image right here are actually polls from Instagram. Because here's the other new thing about our economy is that kind of digital Instagram industry visual thing is that people now go to this bar and they take pictures of just the scene, and then that scene gets broadcasted to like kind of their followers. And what began to happen is we made these stools, and people started contacting me like, where can I get these? These are awesome. And I was like, I just thought it was a one-time project. So we kind of took this project that was initiated by a client and then brought it into production. And that's kind of the two ways that and I say we, it's just myself and one other guy. This is the way that we develop our designs. I don't typically think like, you know what we need? We need a wireframe bar stool in this world. We need to design something that retails for $350. Like, I'm not releasing 800 SKUs a quarter like big manufacturers or something. I have to feel a sense of a need from a client or like a personal need before I develop a product, because we don't need more stuff. So I need to have that initial connect point to know that there's a desire for that thing to develop it. When I was trying to talk about my chair in grad school, it's chairs, there's millions of chairs that have been made and designed, and chairs are kind of a prize kind of thing that a designer can do because they're really hard. It's not like a table, which is like a surface that's level at a certain height. A chair, if you do a bad chair and you have someone sitting in it, like they know immediately, and it's really easy to make a bad chair. But I was talking about the concept of a chair. They really wanted in grad school, like, oh, what's this about? Push it. And I said, well, it's not like we in 2016 or 2013 at the time where we're like, you know what? People stand up and people lie down. We got to make something in between, we got to do something that people can sit like this. Like, that's not where we're at in product development. And design development. People know how to sit, and there are a million ways to sit in a million different chairs. So starting with that initial connection is super, super important for me, because I think if they're already connecting it with it, then multiple people maybe in this kind of tribe will connect with it. So a note on connection at Connecting Things Co. So we had, this response with this stool, and so we decided to bring it to market and put it into production. And so we have the 30-inch bar height and the counter height, and then the 18-inch. So we've got the trio, different versions. The rad thing about the base is that it can be powder coated any color. It can be plated, as you saw, the copper, or brass or chrome. And so we've built out this kind of suite of objects on this octahedron kind of family. And this just gets into studio practice life, where, I just dumped so many slides on here. I kind of just wanted to show you guys some stuff, but I'm just going to blast through these. So I think what I want to land on here is client-initiated projects and kind of personal projects where, there's this, like, we just make stuff and I don't actually know the intention of it, but I make it and I put it out there, and sometimes what happens is a client will see it and they will kind of resolve. An interior designer will look at it and be like, that neon thing you did? Like, we'd like to get a trio of neon lights. And so we did this trio of neon lights for an Urban Outfitters in Chicago. Another version of the chair. Practice your practice. That should have been at the beginning of this section. A good buddy of mine named Jack Sanders says this: practice your practice. And so here's how I practice my practice. I make things that I don't know what they do, and I stand on them, I jump on them. So in the kind of spirit of making stuff all the time, and welding is so easy and quick, is that I just like zap things together sometimes just to see what they look like, see what they do. And I put them out there and see what the response is. So here's a series of planters that I started riffing on with just prefabbed parts, prefabbed rings, prefabbed discs. And from that, an interior designer said, we'd really like to put that in the lobby of a business hotel in Boston. I was like, okay, cool. They're like, and we want it teal to match these chairs. I was like, no problem. So some more stuff. I really like plants. I think plants are important. Making stuff, practicing my practice. So this is just like stuff, you guys. There are different, rings, prefab stuff that you just go through and I just zap it together and see what it is. And this kind of approach, the self-initiated kind of development to design is, development of making is, the metaphor I would use is like people who play music and they just jam. They get together and they jam. You like, hey, let's jam. Let's slap the bass. I don't play music at all, and my mind doesn't work that way. But if I did, I would get together with some guys, and I would just like see what comes up. Let's just like make some beats. And then from that, I think what happens is that you find like a riff, and you find a beat or a jingle or something. You're like, okay, that works. All right, let's take that. Let's develop that. Okay, let's put that in the chorus. And you start moving. You essentially take notes and create a new raw material that's a little bit longer, like a melody. And then you take that and you develop it. And then essentially, I think you get a song. So this is the same kind of way. Like, this is just me studio jamming, just making stuff, zapping it together, seeing what it looks like. And then from that, I kind of create a new level of raw material that I can then apply design to if I need to. Sometimes we want to develop a design, and this is the outcome of like the wrong thinking about design. That I noticed is that the play thing, I just need to play and apply design later, because if I don't, what will happen is I will talk with my fellow designer, Miles, and I'm like, Miles, we need to do a coat hook. We need to do like a rad, modern coat hook. And we just start thinking, and I was like, that's what the market needs, which the market doesn't need another coat hook. Like, that's the wrong way to think about it. And we were just like thinking hard, and we couldn't come up with anything. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. You know what we need to do? We just need to make a little penis and put it on the wall. And that's exactly what happened. And so I immediately pull up my phone and Google image search penis wall hook, which never do. Never do anything. My mom, we were recently on a camping trip, and my mom was looking at towables like behind a boat. Like in the inflatable like tubing stuff to go behind a boat. And she was looking it up, want to look up at Dick's Sporting Goods. So she types in Dick's inflatables in a Google image search, which is just the best. And she was like, she's telling me the story. And she's like, and you'll never know what came up. And I was like, no, Mom, I know. I have a pretty good idea what came up when you Google image Dick's inflatables, which is just classic, like, our parents like being so surprised at the internet coming up with porn when you type in dicks inflatables. But anyways, this is the response of like, we can't figure this out. You know what? Let's just have fun and let's make just a little cartoon penis wall hook. Because when I did that Google image search I did, there was just some nasty looking wall hooks with cast brass, veiny, like just wrong, right? Wrong. So what is the right kind of happy little penis that someone would want to hang on their wall so that when they pull off that towel, they giggle? I want the giggly penis. So we developed this, and literally 15 minutes later, this thing was in production. I was like, Miles, go render this, send it to manufacturing, and we lasered out all of these wall willies, which is a trademarked name. And it's just this little happy guy, and I brought some if you want to buy one at the end of this. Give them to your friend, give them to your partner, whatever. But the wall willy is kind of a response to overthinking design and just having fun. And to date, we've done about like $8,000 in these, and they're $20 each. We released them last September, and it's just like a funny thing to just remind us to keep it light and enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with a little cartoon penis. Recent projects, I did the Polar store in Laguna. These shapes, the great thing, I've had a great relationship with Polar for years. We met when I used to live in Portland, and they were able to say, we know your work, just go nuts, do your thing. We want hanging planters and just whatever, get wild. And so I was able to just build more sculptural forms and play. These are 20-inch rings, like giant terracotta pots. So I was able to just play and do that. So from that kind of play, and as you saw earlier, I'm able to pull from that new material and design products. So design this series of products that are more streamlined and straight, and have these inset trays that are zinc plated so that they make like a really nice tray for your pot, so you don't have to get a separate saucer, so the water can leak out onto it without getting all over your place. And the tall one works really well as a side table. So these are these column plant stands, and this is that really cool zinc plating, which is for hardware like drywall screws, deck screws. That's what they use. So it's this like really cool industrial process that has this kind of magical iridescent rainbow kind of feel to it. I'm just gonna blast through these. Recently, we had the opportunity to collaborate with the Land of Nod, which is a cool kids brand. If you have kids, you already know. If you don't have kids, you will know, because it's just a really cool kids brand. And we designed this system that all use these linear lines and then these kind of accessories that hook on. So that's a library cart, and here's a play table. And then there's a mirror in the background. It's called the Linear Collection, just really, really simple. We designed this in February of 2015, and because it's such a big company, it didn't release to this past spring. So you design and send these things out in drawing form, and then a year later, it pops out as this product, which is totally new territory for us to design that way. Here's the mirror. And you can style it in so many different ways. You can put all of your combs in it, and your bracelets and your scrunchies. Another thing we specialize in is heirloom quality, meticulously handcrafted Instagram posts, such as this. Again, in the nature of not taking ourselves too seriously, I am an Instagram fanatic and oversharer, and we just share everything that's going on in the studio in daily life. I recently met a marketing director, and she said, how far out in advance do you plan your Instagram posts? And I was like, anywhere from like 7 to 15 seconds is really what it is. I'm like, really? And I was like, no, this is what I'm working on right now, today. This is what I'm thinking. Like, I actually still Instagram, which is, I think, a very rare thing. And also, I'm able to do it because it's so much wrapped up in my personality rather than appealing to someone who's watching over the marketing budget or something like that. So that collection we did for Land of Nod kind of informed this recent collection that we designed for New York Design Week this past spring. And the way we initiated this was also kind of a client-initiated design. We had a client who said, I want a C table. And you know what a C table is? The kind of thing that goes over like your couch so you can work on your laptop or, eat food or whatever. This is the first time where I actually looked at the market and saw what was available. And I noticed they were all square tubing with like wood tops. And I was like, well, we need to do something a little bit different that kind of works in our vernacular. So we did this completely metal version with perforated steel and this kind of graphic drop with that. And out of that kind of design, again, just changed proportions, expanded, contracted, and created a series of nesting tables, a toilet paper holder, which I'm really excited about, a hand towel rack, and this kind of wall shelf thing. The same kind of idea, grill, perforated steel. And again, the toilet paper holder, I'm really excited about this one. This is one of those things that, we have this raw material and we develop this visual language, and then we able to kind of bring it to market, look around and see, hey, do toilet paper holders come in different colors? I don't think they do. That's like a wide open market that I noticed, and so we're launching this series of toilet paper holders that come in different colors because you can only get them in like brass, nickel, and the funny thing also is that toilet paper holders are really inexpensive. Like the brass one at Home Depot is like $14. But here's like the steel powder coated one that I think is going to have to be $38, by the time it gets to retail, because we're manufacturing them in small amounts, but also we're manufacturing them here. But it's just a totally different market. But I think a $38 toilet paper holder will do pretty well. So I'm going to wrap this up because I got a lot of people like, okay, bro, that was a lot of slides. I got to get to work. So I'm going to end you with this. Eventually, everything connects. People, ideas, objects. The quality of the connections is the key to quality, per se. And this is another quote by this very, obscure designer named Charles Eames. But I think it fits with not only the theme of this talk series, but really what drives my work is having that connection and having that direct, non-abstract kind of connection and approach to the concept in my work, and which is basically like, as I said, non-abstract, simple, connect. This thing works. It's available at this price. We're not commenting on the space between our house. We're sitting in our house, having a conversation together, enjoying watching Stranger Things, and that's really what drives it. And so in that spirit, the next step for me in Long Beach is that I'm actually moving into a brick and mortar kind of storefront space where I'll have the warehouse in the back and I'll have a retail shoppable showroom in the front. Long Beach is a weird city because there's about 500,000 people that live there, and there's no real design voice. There's not really a design community. There's nothing happening quite like this. And so to be able to have kind of a brick and mortar space, also in the spirit of what gets created here at the lab and the camp, where you have people to meet with in real life. This is what we're doing moving forward. So we're gonna opening in like a month, this brick and mortar space to connect with people in real life. And thank you for connecting with me. I don't know, time-wise, I'm so open to questions if you guys have them, but if you guys need to go, I'm okay with that. What are you thinking, Brady? Like, yeah. I will field questions. I wanted to talk less, but as you probably noticed, I don't do that so well. So please, questions, anything, specifically business. I left out kind of like business ideas and models and stuff like that. If you want to ask me, I will be totally candid with you about numbers, because I think that's actually helpful for people to know stuff like that. So fire away. If not, enjoy your day. That anthropology contract. Okay, so that was my first order. They ordered 10 chairs. They never ordered again. They didn't sell them. I don't think. What was that? Well, it was still so new for me. So figuring out like wholesale and like margin and like, oh, how am I going to make these? Because I was still making them myself. So I was like doing the frames. Now I have manufacturers for the frames, but that was still all in-house. So I was like, I think this is what I need to make on these margin-wise. And so what they had to push it up and retail it for, I don't think they were able to really move them because they did like 2.5 times. So no, they did it online, and it came out spring 2014, and it was before I had like any product really in the market product-wise, like with names, but like never heard from them again, or the buyers, or like whatever, and that was just kind of it, So that was a smaller thing, but I do a lot of work with West Elm. West Elm buys my stuff. That side table of mine that flies for them. They sell that online, and it flies because it's $300, not like $1,800, So, yeah, it's tough as an independent designer who reaches a very specific design and visual tribe to think about how to reach the mass market, in a sense, because we live in a very kind of design. See you, buddy. Affluent kind of culture. Things like the lab and the camp don't happen everywhere, and cool looking restaurants and beautiful people. And so it's when you talk about a company that's like trying to reach the entire country and move serious units, that kind of approach, like what sells isn't the most avant-garde or even colorful. I mean, even for me, I do a lot of color. Black and white still sells the most, So it's tough. I don't have kind of access to their data and their metrics on like what kind of product moves. And I only need to sell 10 of something rather than 1 million of something, So it's kind of a different sense of scale. But yeah, I always like, hey, do you guys want to pick this one up or pick this one up? And then there's also more price sensitivity too, for a different market. Like this chair is $1,200 retail, and it costs me just under $400 to make, and I wholesale it for like $600, so I'm not even making a huge margin there. And then we retail it for $1,200, which is a lot of money, really. For some people, it's not a lot of money, and they'll just like go to my shop, online shop, and they'll be like, "Yeah, I'll take 4 in brass, thanks." I'm like, that's a different version of human. I'm like, I can't do that. But I'm like, there are some people who are totally comfortable to do that. So the different markets, it's hard to figure out how to do it.